Welcome back! This is a little bit of an overdue album review. I've been meaning to talk about this album for a while. I haven't found the time or the inspiration yet to do so, but we're talking about Primitive by Soulfly. This album was an album that back in the day I was very much aware of, and I think I probably did here, just I was so obsessed with other music that I never really gave it much of a chance. And many years later, I listened to it and was like, whoa! Jump the fuck up! I'm not the biggest fan of Soulfly. That's not to say that I don't like them. Their discography is so huge that it's kind of overwhelming. I know this album very, very well, but every other album of theirs is kind of washed over me for the most part, everyone that I've listened to. It's not to say that I don't like it, just this one gripped me hugely, and none of their other albums really did. I can't really explain why. I can tell you why this album gripped me. There's a bunch of reasons. A lot of them are contributing artists. This album has Grady Avenell from Willhaven, Chino Moreno from Deftones, Corey Taylor of Slipknot and Stone Sour, Sean Lennon, who just so happens to be the son of John Lennon, one of the Beatles, and Tom Araya from a little band called Slayer. Those are some pretty heavy-hitting contributing artists. Yeah, in 2000, to have all of those guys as contributing artists, I think probably the least known one is going to be Grady from Willhaven. But if you know Willhaven, you know. But all of those other ones are huge contributing artists to, I think this is like their second album, or maybe third album. That's huge. When I listen to this album, when I start it, I'm like, yeah, cool, I know this album, I love this album. And then as the songs go on, I'm like, oh yeah, there's Grady, there's Chino, there's Corey Taylor. Like, it's insane, the energy that they bring to this already very energetic album. It's crazy, man. This album, one criticism that I will give it is it's a bit long. It's 52 minutes, which I think is quite long. For an album of this time, it's not really that long, but these days it kind of feels long. Obviously, we're going to get into the songs, but my immediate thoughts right now as I'm speaking is that I, most of the time, don't make it to the end of the album, because I feel like the last couple of songs I can kind of do without. It sort of goes out on a whimper. To my memory, I haven't listened to this album for quite a while, by the way. At least a year. I've been sort of neglecting album reviews recently, you may have noticed. I was going to start another video, but it's going to be quite a huge undertaking. So that will probably be coming out in the future from here when you're watching this. And I thought I could do an album review. That's going to be fairly quick, relatively speaking, compared to the other thing I'm working on. And this album just popped into my mind. I'm like, yes, Primitive. That's going to be a fun album to talk about. So let's do that. So here we are. Considering there's only 4 people in this band, they make a hell of a lot of noise for just 4 people. There's a lot of additional artists on this. I'll put it here, but I'm not going to list them all because we'll be here for quite a while. But if you want to know, they're all here. This album did okay. It didn't top any charts or anything. I think it did pretty well for the kind of music that it is. You know, it's not pop music. This is pretty intense. So yeah, like I say, I'm not the biggest fan of Soulfly. Not to say I dislike them, I just don't know them that well. But I know this album very, very, very well. It's going to be like 95% of what I know about Soulfly, basically. So, without further ado, let's get into the review.
Let's get ready to jump the fuck up! Back to the primitive! Fuck all your politics!
So obviously Soulfly from Brazil. I mean, at least Max Cavalera is from Brazil. And it starts off with a sound that is difficult to identify. It seems like a stringed instrument, but it's also like being pitched up and down and like twisted in some way. I'm like, okay, this is clearly adding influences from somewhere else in the world than North America, let's say, or Europe, or whatever. It's a very weird way to start off the album. You're not quite sure what's coming. Once the song Back to the Primitive does kick in, it's immediately a lot of fun. It's a nice warm-up. I wouldn't say it's a hot intro, though. Considering how intense this album gets, this isn't amazing off the bat, I will say that, but it's warming up. This song, particularly, is exactly the sound of metal in the 2000s. The down-tunedness, the excessive percussionists, like, you know, clearly inspired by Slipknot, I would assume. Let's just add more drums, like just more drums. And I was totally down for that back in the day. Why this didn't really grab my attention, I can't tell you. But when I really discovered it, maybe 10 years ago or something, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking, man? This is great. And when we get to like the 3-minute 20 mark, there's something that could be closely linked to Korn, I think. A weird scatting voice thing, like that's clearly a take on Korn's, you know, scatting. Yes, very of the time, it is good, it's just not amazing as an intro song. I think they could have done something to have more of an impact. That's not to say it's bad, I know how good this album gets, so maybe let's just move on to the next song. Pain, featuring Grady Avenel and Chino Moreno.
Speak up, you know what is up, to the silence who set you up.
As soon as this song starts, within 2 bars, I get chills, because I remember how good this song is. If I was to compile a list of songs to be like someone's introduction to how nu metal sounds, this is going to be on there. I've always thought that, because it does everything that nu metal does in a nutshell, basically. It's so good. The perfect nu metal riff, I think. So we get a few nice little verses from Max, and you're like, okay, this is cool, this is banging. And there's a little bit of a break, and then Grady from Willhaven comes in. And he kind of shows up Max. It's kind of like he's in the studio and he's like, yeah, you think that's screaming? This is screaming. Yeah, Willhaven, for those of you who've watched all of my previous videos, you'll know this, but Willhaven had a huge impact on me back in the day. So again, it mystifies me why I never grabbed onto this specific song, at least, back in the day. Willhaven's not really a nu metal band, it's more like a hardcore band, kind of. There's a connection there, there's a few similarities, but I've always loved Grady's voice. His screaming voice is like peak. And so including him on this song is like, yeah, of course I'm gonna be happy with this. After Grady's verse, in comes Chino with the same kind of lo-fi effect on his voice that would be expected in Deftones songs. It kind of blows my mind thinking about the song, or like analysing the song, because it's definitely Soulfly, unquestionably, and you've got Max introing it. But then you've got Grady from Willhaven and Chino from Deftones in the same song, on song 2 as well. That's insane, man. And then in the chorus, you've got all of them screaming pain, all like on top of each other. It's one of the most nu metal songs ever written. And then the elongated scream into the kind of half-tempo, almost industrial bridge. Fantastic. Unfortunately, though, once you get to like 3/4 of the way through the song, it does kind of meander and then starts repeating itself, which is a shame. You know, often one would say like this album is front-loaded. I feel like this song is front-loaded because there's so much that happens in the first half, and then in the second half it's just kind of recycling ideas, basically, which, like I say, is a shame, but for me, this is top tier nu metal material. Excellent. Bring It.
Carbonate, war is insane. Everywhere. Bring it.
So the intro for Bring It is a little bit thrashy. It's got the snare and the downbeat, but then when Max's vocals come in, it's just like, oh, Jesus. It's so intense. This is pure mosh pit music. This is like mosh pit music in its purest form. There's no other reason why this music was made. I will say this album, once again, is another album that I really enjoy listening to in the gym. Really works for lifting because it's so angry. It's so constantly antagonistic and rage infused. Gym and mosh pit, I feel like they kind of go hand in hand. They're two things I very much enjoy, and they're two things that require a lot of physical exertion. And this album, perfect for both. And Bring It, about halfway through, takes a bit of an unexpected turn where it starts with like a reggae section. Where's that come from? But again, this is just another example of how multifaceted nu metal can be, where you can just throw in a reggae section in an album written by Brazilians and that just be fine. I love it. Yeah, and when the reggae section does end, which in my opinion kind of goes on for a bit too long. I think that could have been 16 bars, maybe 32 bars. I feel like it goes on for 64 bars. That's too long, I think. And then when the heaviness does come back in, there's like 20 seconds left of the song. I would have structured this song a little bit differently. It's still good, still love it, it's a banger. Jumpdafuckup, featuring Corey Taylor.
Jump the fuck up!
Maybe you would like to peek through the curtain at the same mistake you know you always make, but
I jump the fuck up! Walking in the streets and looking at this shit. I'm full of hate, don't fuck with me.
I feel like back in the day, this was probably the one I heard, honestly. Yeah, this was a single. Came out the year after the album released, which is interesting. And I think I did hear this back in the day. I mean, you know, it was Corey Taylor, Slipknot in 2000, 2001. Of course this is going to get out there. I don't know how I reacted to it. I don't remember it from 2000, I must confess, but I must have heard it. Again, this, along with Pain, perfect mosh pit music. Like, this is exactly what it's designed for. It's giving you the impression that something's coming, and then when it does not let you down. Yeah, it's interesting that the contribution of Corey Taylor in the early part of the song, at least. I mean, this was the time that Stone Sour was a thing, I think, and you know, Corey Taylor was spreading himself very thin at this time. He comes in with very much Stone Sour type vocals. After the impact of the drop of the song, it's kind of weird. It kind of takes the momentum away, but not for long. Yeah, when Corey does start screaming, it's like, there it is. That's why you were doing that, because you were blueballing us, you were teasing us, because you knew that we knew that you were going to start screaming at some point. And so I do kind of like that he holds off. He doesn't just come in immediately, because, you know, there's Max doing the screaming. About halfway through the song, that's when he starts doing his proper screams, and when it does hit, it's like, oh, there it is. That's what I've been waiting for.
Destructive piece of shit, spare me in. I don't know your goddamn.
I feel like, actually, this album particularly inspired Slayer, and I did mention this in my God Hates Us All review, that I feel like Soulfly was an inspiration for Slayer around this time. Obviously, nu metal was hugely inspirational for that album, but specifically Soulfly in the structure of their riffs and the tone of their guitar. I really think this album impacted Slayer big time. I could be wrong, it could have just been a coincidence, but there's something about it that I get a similar energy from both albums. Mulambo. So this, I believe, is the first track in Portuguese. Portuguese has always been a confusing language to me because I speak Spanish fluently, and Portuguese is like close to Spanish, but also I listen to it and I'm like, okay, I understand like 3 out of every 5 words. And so listening to this song, this is a bit of a skipper for me, I will confess. Kind of because of that, because I don't know what you're saying, but I do know what you're saying, and it kind of confuses my mind, I guess. The percussion in this song is fantastic. The clunk clunk, like it sounds like an elevator smashing into the ground or something. It sounds huge. Yeah, really nice use of percussion in this song. Same with most of this album, but not every single song. But the percussion, it feels like because we've had so many contributing vocalists on this album already, not having one means you've got to fill in the gaps where there's no one new, essentially. So I feel like the percussion is doing that. And it works, I think, for the most part. It really works. It really gives the album a sense of tribalness, I guess. It's a kind of dumb way to put it, but it makes me think of like a large group of people playing these songs rather than it just being 4 people. The end of Mulambo is one of the more fast-paced sections of this whole album. It goes so fast, it's so intense. Again, really, 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 really good mosh pit music. I wish I could have seen Soulfly around this time. And I mean, I'm sure today, they're still active, and there's, you know, Cavalera Conspiracy and everything. Max and I feel like we have a similar view on what music should be made for, and I think that's mosh pits. Sun Song featuring Sean Lennon.
Sometimes I don't want to face life.
Dust myself off and I scream at the sky. It beats so hard but I can't let it die.
Okay, I do remember this song. Like I said, I've listened to this album many times, and in my mind, it's not one of my favorite songs on the album, but I will say the riff in this song is very cool. And the first vocals we've really heard, aside from Corey Taylor a little bit, that are kind of in the background, like not just screaming directly in your face. And it's interesting that it should be an offspring of the Beatles that would be doing that. It's so weird, right? Having John Lennon's son on this album. I know nothing about John Lennon's son at all. This is the only thing that I know of his entire life. But it's just weird to include such a person on such an album. There's elements in this song that remind me of Limp Bizkit. There's something in the guitar that does kind of remind me of something that Wes would do in Limp Bizkit around this time. The third of the song. What are you doing? Like, this could have been maybe an interlude or something. That could have been nice. And then the rest of the song just be cut off before that happens. I don't know. I'm not sure how much of Sean Lennon is in the end of the song. Maybe he's contributing to like the keys or something. I don't know. If I'm in the gym, I'm going to skip the second half of this song. I'm not saying it's bad, it just doesn't do much for me, you know? Interesting use of the same weird stringed instrument sound that we had right at the very beginning of the album. It's interesting that it makes a return here as like a theme, I guess. Boom! Again, the riff that kicks in with Boom in the first few seconds of it is such a cool riff. The riffs on this album are 10 out of 10 every single time. There's some kind of sample, I think, where it's like, I think because I've heard it so many times, it's hard for me to decipher exactly what it is, but it sounds like a voice. It could be someone like moving their hand up and down on the guitar strings, creating like a scratching effect. I'm not sure what it is. But there's something about that that reminds me of Guano Apes, if that means anything to you at all. They released an album around this time, which again I listened to quite a lot back in the day. I don't know, there's some connection there between that sound and the other sound. It's probably just me. Something I will say about this album that isn't amazing is Max's lyrics. They're not the best. They're kind of infantile sometimes. His mother tongue is Portuguese, so I get it. Lyrics like these were kind of typical at the time, but the way he delivers them, it's like a kind of like a bully in school or something. They're not very well thought out, they're not very poetic, they're very to the point, which I do generally appreciate, but there's something about some of the lyrics on this where I'm like, you couldn't think of any other way to word that? What I was just saying about some infantile lyrics, going, what you got, what you got, boom. I do like that. I will confess, I love that. Because it seems quite self-aware that this is just, you know, dumb lyric writing. But sometimes, I don't know, it doesn't annoy me, I'm fine with it, because I'm not that much of a lyric guy, but a lot of the time they seem kind of first draft lyrics, you know?
Using people like they are tools, treat them like they're just fools.
Terrorist, featuring Tom Araya.
Spreading terrorism through the music, rebelling against all this bullshit. Confront and destroy, confront and destroy.
At this stage in the album, I think having Tom Araya as the first vocalist that appears on the song is a smart move, because on every other song, it's been Max, then Grady, then Chino, or Max, then Corey. You know, it's always Max that intros the song, and in this song, you got Tom Araya right out the gate. That kind of makes this my favorite song, because I'm quite a big Slayer fan. Quite a big Slayer fan. I made this, by the way. So having Tom just make the song explode in your face immediately, very smart decision. I also feel like in these verses, it's kind of Tom and Max kind of bouncing off each other. It hasn't really happened on this album before. It's always been like, you have one verse, then I have the next verse, whereas this is like A, B kind of bouncing off each other. It's really cool. And I think their voices actually complement each other. Tom's is much more shrill, I guess, and Max's is sort of subdued and lower. Really nice combination. And then in the chorus, it's basically like a thrash song, pretty much. It's sort of thrash punky kind of song. I can only assume that was Tom's influence. Or like, we're making a song with Tom Araya, we've got to make something that sounds a little bit Slayery. The moment at 2 minutes 29 seconds is probably my favorite point on the album, aside from Grady in Pain. Because at this point, the song just explodes like no other song has exploded on this album. And again, I think that's probably Tom Araya's influence. If I am in the gym, I'll try to time it properly so that when I'm doing my next set, I'm doing it in time with this. Crazy, man, it's so intense. I do wonder, actually, what I was saying before about how I feel like Soulfly and this album specifically was an influence on God Hates Us All by Slayer. I do wonder if, because this would have probably been done before God Hates Us All. That came out 2001. This album came out 2000. So I'm wondering if this experience with Max in the studio, with this kind of music, influenced where Slayer would go next. It must have done. It can't just be a coincidence, because this kind of sounds like God Hates Us All in some ways, when it's just the parts with Tom. I think we all know what Max Cavalera is like. He's pretty cool. He's a pretty chill dude. Has clearly a very strong work ethic, considering how long Soulfly and he himself have been active over the years. I can only assume, because, you know, Slayer in 2000 is Slayer And Slipknot is Slipknot, you know, and Deftones, they're, you know, pretty huge as well. I can only assume that Max was just a really convincing guy to get these huge artists, bigger than Soulfly. All of these artists, okay, maybe not Willhaven, but all of these people, these individuals that contributed to this album are massive compared to Soulfly. Especially Tom Araya and Slayer, you know, at this point in Soulfly's career, like, not many people really know who Soulfly is. So it's really interesting that he managed to get all of these artists on board. Not just one, not just a contributing artist, but like, what, 5 of them? That's crazy, man. That shows how willing people were to work with him, because I don't feel like anyone that contributed on this album phoned it in. You know, they were all clearly on their A game at the time, and they didn't have to be. It's really interesting. I love music history stuff, it's fascinating. The Prophet.
Time has arrived, we see all the signs. Revolution, now is the time. Become the prophet.
I think The Prophet is the most Korn sounding song on this album. There's some kind of distorted lo-fi vocal in the background that does kind of remind me of Korn, especially what Korn were doing around this time. Actually, I don't really have much to say about The Prophet, honestly. It's kind of one of the more meandering songs, and it's not just because it doesn't have a guest vocalist on it. It doesn't really do much. It sounds like Korn. If I'm being harsh, it kind of sounds like a Korn ripoff. But that's not to say it's bad. I do still like it. I just don't. I'm not as excited by Prophet as most of these other songs. And also, at this point, we're getting towards the end of the album now. At this point, it's like, yeah, okay. You at this point, you really need to do something different and interesting that you haven't done yet. And I feel like this is actually one of the songs that is adding the least amount to the album. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly instrumental. There's not much vocals on this. And again, it's kind of doing everything that the album has been doing up until this point. The album has been very good up until this point, but it's not doing anything new. It kind of feels a bit like filler, honestly. So let's just move on to Soulfly II. It is adding something new, but is it necessary? I don't know. It is interesting to hear some sounds that are not just pure distorted mosh pit music, although I do quite like that. But it's interesting to add some of that Brazilian flair, I guess. I mean, this would make really good music for like a documentary or something, where they're like filming the wilderness or something. It would fit for that perfectly. But after The Prophet and Terrorists featuring Tom Araya, what is this? What are you doing? Do I want this? I don't know. And I will say this song is the longest song on the album at 6 minutes. It's too long. Doesn't need to be here. I don't know. Is this filler? I don't know. Do I like it? Yes, I do, actually. I do like it. But it's too long. It could have been like a minute-long interlude somewhere in the middle of the album that could have broken things up a little bit nicely. Last song, In Memory Of.
Yo, life's web wants me in debt and tries to collect. My breath is ransom in turn for my soul silhouette.
Walked the psychopath of Timothy Leary. Would sell therapy, wasn't curing me. God, but fear is scary.
So this is the first song with any kind of hip-hop influence at all. And it just goes straight in for it, right on the last song. That's kind of a weird choice. And this is kind of what I was talking about right at the beginning of this review, is that by the end of the album, or like the last couple of songs of the album, I'm basically done. And I think this is kind of why. Not to say I dislike this song, but the last 2 tracks are throwing in like stuff like, where's this come from? You know, I feel like you could have removed these 2 songs and not really lost that much. This, to me, very much feels like something off of Follow the Leader by Korn.
So large, the newest extension of Soulfly II. From now until the day that I die.
I'm yet to review that album, but maybe I will do someday. And they were adding like the hip-hop tracks and stuff. I see it, I get it, I'm on board, but I just think it's a bit of a mess. But it's more spread throughout the album, whereas this is just this, now, right at the end. It's a bit confusing. I do like it, it is interesting to listen to, it's just such a tonal shift from all of the mosh pit bangers we've heard throughout all of this album that I'm kind of like, nah, do I need this? Nah, I don't know, let's move on to something else. So that's basically the album. So this album I do really like, and that's why I decided to do this review, because it's an album that kind of sticks out in my mind as like a totem pole of really good albums from around the time, even though I didn't listen to it at the time. But I have listened to it a lot, and there's some moments on this album that are incomparable to any other albums. Having the contributing artists, I feel like those songs are the strongest songs. This vocalist from a different band is gonna push you to do something a bit more adventurous, I think. And had this album not had those contributing artists, I don't know if I'd really enjoy it. But I mean, obviously it's impossible to know because it is what it is, this is how it exists. There's like half of this album that I think is top tier, like up there with Korn and Limp Bizkit and Slipknot, but that's partly because of the other artists that are on this album, you know? After having analysed it here, speaking to you, I don't know if I enjoy this album as much as I think I do, because like I said, the last 3 songs I basically never listened to. So there's like half of this album that I think is phenomenal, and then the rest of it I'm not that bothered about. This is feeling like a 7. It feels like there's a lot of filler, as was typical of the time. It's 50 minutes long, which is bordering on annoyingly long. But the solid tracks are beautiful in their own ugly way. I think they're fantastic, particularly Pain, Jump the Fuck Up, and Terrorist. Those 3 songs are incredible. But the rest of it I can kind of leave. And I know we have the freedom to do that these days. I think a 7 is reasonable. Pretty low for an album that I've chosen to review because I like it so much, you know. But yeah, that's it. I'm just going to say thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. And if you are already subscribed, then thank you for being here. I've still not thought of how to end videos yet, though, so I'm just going to say, go away.